Hello friend, John Dalton here for the Emergence podcast, where we explore consciousness, the mystery and love. And in this episode we have a question about Carl Jung and enlightenment, and then we also go into obsession, aging well, connection, avoiding holy men, making time for wellness, mental health, thinking, negativity, choosing yourself, connection, curating your life, and the full moon. I had a question come in on the Further Emergence Discord. This person says, "Hi John, do you think that the Jungian concept of individuation is the same or similar to enlightenment? I've learned a little about it a while ago and now I Google it, and one definition is, individuation is the process, simple or complex as the case may be, by which every living organism becomes what it was destined to become from the very beginning. In Jung's view, no one is ever completely individuated. While the goal is wholeness and a healthy working relationship with self, the true value of individuation lies in what happens along the way. The goal is important only as an idea. The essential thing is the opus which leads to the goal. That is the goal of a lifetime." And then the person says, maybe it's not. All right, now, just on the off chance you don't know who Carl Jung is, he was a contemporary of and a student of Sigmund Freud, who was the first person really to kind of start using talk therapy to help people with mental health issues. And Freud is great and everything and very groundbreaking. But I never really warmed to him. I don't know if he was the sort of person one could warm to. But he had very groundbreaking insights about sex and how sex was the driving force in a lot of things. Then Jung comes along and he's, as I say, a student of Freud, and they're going great guns for a while and then they fall out. And Jung does his own thing. And so very much in the kind of the cliche of the person lying on the couch and the therapist saying, "Tell me about your childhood," in an Austrian or in Jung's case, Swiss accent. And, a lot of pictures you see of Jung is of like this kind of very, very nice looking old grandfather looking figure, with this sort of circular glasses and a very kind looking face. So some of the things that really stick out to me, I've read a couple of his books, and you can't work in consciousness and not bump into Jung. He's such a monolith in that kind of realm, and very groundbreaking, and really ploughed his own furrow. Is that the right word? I think it is. Went his own way. So one thing that I've heard about him, not sure if this is true, but I like the idea of it, is that he used to make time every day to go down to his back garden and play with sticks in the dirt like a little kid. I'd always thought that was very profound. And I don't do it myself, but the idea of play is, and like somebody who's so lived the life of the mind and consciousness so much that he made time for that. I always thought that was very significant. The other thing that always stands out to me is that he had a nervous breakdown himself, or what was called a nervous breakdown, during World War I. Now, I think Jungian scholars are a bit touchy about referring to it as a nervous breakdown. I don't think they like that. I think they have different names for it. From my reading of it, I think he had a spiritual crisis, because it was in his late 30s and he'd achieved everything he'd wanted, money, success, prestige, wife, kids. He had it all. And he seems like he went into the dark night of the soul, because he didn't just have a nervous breakdown or a mental snap or a psychotic episode or anything like that. He recorded everything, and he discovered a lot about himself. And I think it's all in his book called The Red Book. Haven't read it, But that's his journey through that dark night of the soul. Another thing I like about him, or just a different perspective, is that film. It's called A Dangerous Method. It's got Michael Fassbender and Keira Knightley in it, and Viggo Mortensen. And it goes through the relationship between Freud and Jung, and Jung's relationship with this woman that Keira Knightley plays. And it's sort of a little insight into what he was like as a person. Don't know if it's historically correct. I'd probably is fictionalized, or, I think all the characters were real, but I don't know if the details are. But it's just a good look at it. And then the other thing, and I was trying to find this quote. I think I read it in one of his books. So he gives this, he's given this lecture. And in the lecture, he gives an example of somebody who he diagnosed with a brain tumor, I want to say. And he did it through a dream. And he described the person's dream. And I didn't see the brain tumor thing coming at all. But he was completely right. And, the person got surgery and all that. And one of the students in the lecture said, how did you arrive at that diagnosis from that dream, Herr Doctor? Okay, I'm adding that bit. And he gave this answer, which again, I'd love to quote directly, but I can't remember. But basically it took me 30 years to arrive at that diagnosis. And basically it was a kind of a student put down, or a sort of slap on the head, basically going, you can't just get a quick little answer, like I'm not going to be able to trot out a little, here's how you do it, kids, and this little 5-minute explanation of how I did it. He says, basically it's taken me years of gathering data. And I could really relate to it from people asking me about craniosacral things, or the distance work. How do you do that? It's taken me years and years and years to learn how to do it. And I always remembered that explanation, because until I really heard that, I kind of was trying to explain something that's just not explainable in a short period of time. Anyway, back to enlightenment. So, yes, those are some. That's a quote for sure. Here are some other quotes that I like from Jung. One is, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That is a beautiful little sentiment. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And that's that thing of going, what I'm so interested in about making your unconscious conscious, actively getting involved in it. Because when you're not actively involved in it, you feel like it's all fate, and you feel like, it's just serendipity. And he was big on serendipity, but actual serendipity as against your unconscious working and you thinking that it's serendipity, which is a different thing. So that's a beautiful idea about making the unconscious conscious, so that you don't feel like it's your fate, but it's actually not. It's your unconscious. Now, the other one that's often talked about or trotted out from Jung in relation to enlightenment is, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is why I was saying I think he went through a spiritual crisis when in that time in World War I, because you don't arrive at something like that without really going into a lot of depth on the inside. The full quote, because often that bit is taken out of context, but the full quote is, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. That is just a megawatt paragraph. There's so much in that. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. I have found that to be true. This thing about you don't become enlightened by imagining, figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That's my experience too. And then this thing of who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. That's why I sort of talk about consciousness so much, because outside is so distracting. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful distraction, but it is that distraction. It is that a distraction. So by looking inside, seeing what's going on in there, that's how you become enlightened. Another one, which I find as an enlightened person very insightful, from Carl. He says, even the enlightened person remains what he is, and is never more than his own limited ego before the one who dwells within him, whose form has no knowable boundaries, who encompasses him on all sides, fathomless as the abysms of the earth and vast as the sky. Now, that to me is talking about the mystery, which I talk about a lot. And I can totally relate to that. That all makes perfect sense to me, and that's my experience for sure. The only slight difference is this idea of the one who dwells within him. I don't see that as a separate thing. It's all me, and it's not, there's no other living inside me. It's all me. But it's more, from my perspective, it's more the Rumi idea of, you're not a drop in the ocean. You're the whole ocean contained in a drop. So it's like you're the drop and you're the ocean simultaneously. So I would see it more like that. But he seems to have a pretty good handle on being enlightened. And he's certainly, I don't know. I couldn't, there's no reference to him saying that he was enlightened or not. I suppose it wouldn't have been really fit with the paradigm or who he was. Maybe he did somewhere, maybe among his friends. But what I think stands out for me is it's great to listen to these people, lots of different people, me included, and hear all the lovely things they have to say. And if something resonates with you, great. But as soon as it does, then own it. Because if something resonates with you, it's already in you. It's not like, oh, I heard this from somebody. I do like to credit where I got things, that's for sure. Like I always acknowledge Barry Long, who was my spiritual teacher. And if I happen to hear somebody say something good that really resonates with me, I'll say, oh yeah, I heard this from this person or that person. I think that's, something just courteous really, or it's an expression of gratitude. But the actual act of hearing something and it resonating with you, I think it's really important to own things. It's like you cannot know something, or something can't resonate with you if you don't already know it on the inside. It's just a reminder. And it's fine to listen to everybody and take what resonates with you and what doesn't resonate with you, even though you'd love it to resonate with you, to just let it go, Like as I say, Barry Long was my spiritual teacher, and like a lot of things he said really resonated with me, but there was a lot of stuff that didn't at all. And he would talk about some things and I would be glazing over. I just didn't relate, and that's fine. But it's really important to own what's yours, So if somebody resonates with you, then great, go right into it. Let it permeate you and let what it's bouncing off on the inside help it to come to the fore. So if you're a big fan of Carl Jung and it really resonates with you and his description of individuation is, really resonates with you, beautiful. All right, I hope that helps. Feel free to write to me if you have a question or a comment, or you just like to tell me how things are going. john@furtheremergence.com. Farm news, storms. Storms, that's all I've got. This week there was a storm Agnes. The last week there was another storm something or other. I don't know. It just seems like one storm after another, and then one day of sunshine in between where we all run out and run around in the sunshine and then run back into the house. So yeah, That's the only thing that's been happening around the farm, is just battening down the hatches and hoping the sheep don't blow blow away. So my recommendation this week is for a book. It's a book I read many, many, many years ago. It was my birthday during the week, and my daughter came to visit, and we had a little bit of a Indiana Jones marathon. She hadn't seen them in years, and neither had I, really. And as I was watching it, I was remembering somebody I used to work with who was actually a salesman for office equipment, right? But he was so taken with Indiana Jones. He used to wear a hat like Indiana Jones, and he had a leather flying jacket, which he used to wear on sales call, much to the chagrin of his boss. But he was the guy who recommended this book to me, and the book is called Illusions, and then the subtitle is The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah, and it's by Richard Bach, who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which was a big kind of deal in the early 70s. This book was written in 1977. And I can remember this guy saying to me, I don't know how we got talking about it, but he was saying that down the track that, he'd like to, one of the things he'd like to do is become a reluctant messiah. And I was like, oh, okay. But it's a great little book. I always think very fondly of him when I think about that book and him wearing this little hat. And he was learning to fly and everything, because the character in this book is a pilot. It's a very interesting book, and there's a lot of deep, I don't know if they're truths, but they do sing. There's something about the things that they talk about in this that made my heart sing, and kind of, when you read something, and even though it's not, you can't prove it. Like, this guy was a reluctant messiah, so he could do all sorts of cool tricks, Like, they both flew these old biplanes. They gave people rides in the biplanes. And his plane never had any oil smudges on it, and never had any bugs or anything like that. And he never had to service it. And he could always land in the weirdest kind of places. It's almost like he made the plane levitate. That's just one of the many tricks he did. And somewhere I just kind of, it's like this sense of like, yeah, that's possible. I don't know how it's possible, but it's possible. So there's lots of good stuff in it about enlightenment, even though it's not mentioned explicitly, and just about a way of being that is possible. So I recommend it, highly recommend it. One of the books I read very early on. I would have read it back in the early 80s. If you haven't signed up for my friendly notes, what are you doing with your life? I send out these friendly notes every Sunday. And if you want me to send you one of my friendly notes, or, if you want to get friendly notes from me every Sunday, go to the website, furtheremergence.com, and you'll see a little thing on the bottom, stay in touch, and then you can sign up there. I have 3 trainings. I have one active training on the go at the moment. It's the meditation training. You're not too late for that. You just missed the first week. But if you want to get on with that, so get on the live call. And I do encourage you to get on the live call, because being on the live call is very helpful. I mean, you can listen to last week's recording just to get up to speed, and get on the live call and get the benefit of the group, and then get the benefit of meditating with me. Again, that's all on the website, furtheremergence.com. The other 2 trainings are dealing with the psychic world. And I came across, it comes up regularly in my one-to-one work, dealing with psychic issues, psychic entities, possessions, all that difficult stuff. And I just came across somebody recently who's, very clued in on lots of different ways. I read a book by this person, very good on lots of different things, but very involved in the psychic world, and it's a dangerous thing. And I don't like to be scary about it, but I've just seen it so much. I've just seen people get into trouble with it, thinking that they can have one half and not get the other half in the back door. So that's a very good training, dealing with the psychic world, where I go into all that in more depth. And then the other training I have is a craniopsychotherapy masterclass. So that's for craniopsychotherapists. It's long. It's like 7 hours of video. Now, let's have a look at the memes on the Further Emergence Instagram feed for this week. I didn't write this one, but I think it's pretty good. It says, imagine if we obsessed about the things we loved about ourselves. That's a great idea, isn't it? Obsessing about the things that we love about ourselves. It's good, isn't it? Because we obsess about everything else. And if we could turn that obsession, because we obsess about like things about that we're fearful of, what people said about us, what people didn't say about us, what we meant, what we said, what we shouldn't have said, all that stuff we obsess about. But if we could turn that into obsessing about the things we love about ourselves, that would be powerful, wouldn't it? I mean, there's a trend at the moment about this kind of, it's like a backlash against this kind of thinking of like, oh, everyone's just become self-obsessed and, you know, young people are just so wrapped up in themselves. That's great. That's absolutely great, because like we were saying about Carl Jung earlier on, like the more you figure out about yourself, the less you project it onto others, you know? Like the more you discover your own shadow and deal with it, the less you're going to project your own shadow onto other people. So if you obsess about the things that you love about yourself, you are going to be a nicer person. You're going to be a lot nicer to deal with. And that's a good thing for everybody, I think. And if that is being self-obsessed, great, be self-obsessed. Next one is, I have a real fondness for this picture. It's a picture of an older lady who has made a puppet of herself. And with her puppet of herself, she is feeding a squirrel. And it's just lovely. And I say, here's an older lady using a puppet of herself to feed a squirrel. For me, she is a great example of using her one life wisely. And when I grow up, I want to be just like that lady and have a puppet of myself and go and feed squirrels with it. It's just beautiful. The lady's name is Doris Deither. I hope I'm saying that right. She's an 86-year-old lady and community activist. And good on you, Doris. The next one is a little quote from Carl Jung. I threw this in because I knew I had this question about him. It says, I studiously avoided all so-called holy men. I did so because I had to make do with my own truth, not accept from others what I could not attain on my own. I must shape my life out of myself, out of what my inner being tells me, or what nature brings to me. So that's kind of what I was saying earlier on about him, in that he ploughed his own furrow. He kept his own counsel. And I think there's something smart about avoiding so-called holy men, because there's a lot of people talking about the spiritual life and talking with great certainty. You know, this is what's going on. Here's how to change your life in 3 easy steps. Here's how to get the money, get the women, get the men, get whatever you want. You know, here's how to get enlightened. Here's how to, you know, they're just like laying it out like this is what you should do. And as I've said like many times, the time of the guru is over. The time of the spiritual teacher is over. It was great, it was appropriate, but it's over now. We don't have that crutch anymore. We all have to do it for ourselves now. For me, it just seems like it's a process of friendly accompaniment. That's what we need now, is we're all involved in it. I mean, I think it was Thich Nhat Hanh said the next Buddha is the community. I think that's true. You know, there's no one individual. We've kind of moved beyond that. You know, we're beyond the rock stars, or we are all the rock stars, whichever. I didn't write this one, but it's very true. And my book, Why Do We Get Sick? Why Do We Get Better? Available through all good booksellers. It could be the byline for this book. It says, if you don't make time for your wellness, you'll be forced to make time for your illness. And then it says, read that again. Not wild about that bit. It's a bit judgmental. It's like, read that again, stupid. Anyway, let's just forget that little bit. But the first bit is true. If you don't make time for your wellness, you'll be forced to make time for your illness. My mother used to visit a homeopath years ago, who she became great friends with. And this lady used to go to bed one day every month. She used to go to bed and stay in bed for the whole day, much like a person would do when they are ill. And she did it as a preventative thing. She was like, well, I don't want to have to go to bed because I'm ill, so I'm going to bed because I'm well. I'm having a rest. And I'm behaving as if I'm ill. I'm having my meals brought to me. I'm sleeping for the day. I'm not getting out of bed. I'm not doing anything. And it was a very wise kind of thing. If you are of the mentality that if anything goes wrong with my body, I'm just going to bring it down to the doctor and get them to fix it, then this doesn't apply. Move on. But if you don't want to abdicate your authority of your body to somebody else, and you want to be in charge of your body, or if you relate to your body as a printer for your inner world and not a car that carries you around, if you think of it as a car that carries you around, great, go down to the doctor/mechanic and get them to fix you. If you relate to it as a printer, then everything becomes a clue, everything is significant, and taking time to focus on your wellness means that you won't have to have the distraction and the disruption of illness to get your attention about something, because you already have been putting your attention on your system, and that's a beautiful thing. Next one I didn't write, but it's very good. It says, when you notice your mental health declining, do one small thing that brings you peace. Take a shower, text a loved one, step outside. One little step is all you need to remind yourself that this is not permanent. And I have found this to be true. The one little step, it's the hardest thing to do when you are caught in inertia and a downward spiral of inertia. Taking the one little step seems like the hardest thing to do. And yet once you take that first little step, the next step is easier, and the one after that is easier. And before you know it, you've gone for a walk, or you've just changed the environment. Because we do build up a kind of a stagnancy in your energetic field. And if you can get outside it, and you kind of break it. So that thing of moving is so helpful, and yet the hardest thing to do. So, if you're in that, if you can hear that, just the first step, just don't think about the second, third, fourth, or fifth step, just the first one. If you can get over that, it can make a huge difference. Didn't write the next one, but it's very good, and it kind of relates to the meditation training that's going on at the moment. It says, are you thinking, or is thinking happening to you? Now, that's a great thing to think about. We had this question on the training at the moment. The person asked me was like, if you're not your thoughts, then who is thinking those thoughts? And it's such a good question, because it highlights how we give thinking so much importance that we think it's like it has to belong to somebody. Now, I'm not talking about psychic stuff and things whispering in your ear. That's a different thing. But just this idea of that my thoughts are me thinking these very important thoughts I have about what am I going to do about that thing? What about this other thing? Now, when you start to meditate and you get a bit of distance from it, you begin to see that thoughts are not me. They're just thoughts. They're just little thought bubbles. They're like, little thought bubbles, energetic bubbles that happen. And they're not me. I'm not my thoughts. I'm something else. I'm something else entirely. And when you get a bit of distance from that, you begin to see your thoughts very differently. You begin to relate to your thinking very, very differently. You definitely don't take it so seriously. That these thoughts are, it's like this internal blog that's going all the time. You just you don't see it like that. So this is a good little reminder. Are you thinking, or is thinking happening to you? I didn't write this one, but it's pure wisdom. It's a picture of a piece of bread with some peanut butter liberally applied. It says, if anyone ever tells you you put too much peanut butter on your bread, stop talking to them. You don't need that kind of negativity in your life. I really like this. I'm the sort of person who puts too much peanut butter on my bread, and too much butter. Somebody else added in the comments, and I do that as well. It's just a really nice little playful thing because we kind of think about negativity as like, oh, people complaining, people putting us down, undermining us, gaslighting, all these really heavy, difficult things, And to just bring it back to something as simple as somebody saying to you, put too much peanut butter on your bread and going, I don't need that kind of negativity in my life, you know. Another one I like to say in a similar kind of thing is like, don't ruin my story with the facts. Meaning the facts shouldn't get in the way of a good story. I didn't write this one either. It says, as soon as you choose you, everything else chooses you too. This is the season of you. And this is another one of those seemingly millennial kind of self-centered things. But I just know from talking to people and working with people in one-to-one that the scales is so far tipped the other direction. Privately, people have such a difficulty loving themselves that all of these kind of things are small in comparison to how much people give themselves a hard time privately to themselves, and how difficult it is for them to even just let in the little smallest idea that they might be okay, that they might be not flawed, not screwed up, that they can give themselves a little break, that there can be a little bit of ease inside them. You know, so anything like this is great, I think. Next one is a little quote from Erwin Schrödinger. You know, the guy who did the Schrödinger's cat thing. He was a physicist, Nobel Prize-winning physicist. He says, the total number of minds in the universe is one. In fact, consciousness is a singularity phasing within all beings. So I always have quite a bit of time for people who can prove all this stuff on blackboards, because my mind does not go that way. And I think it's great that those kind of people exist. So for good old Erwin to say something like that is there's quite a bit of weight behind that. He's not just thinking it up out of nowhere. And my spiritual teacher, Barry Long, used to say that as well. His version of it was, there's only one I in the universe, and that's the I in that body listening to these words, which I never really understood when he was saying it, but I kind of get it a bit now. And, you know, Erwin Schrödinger here is saying the similar thing. The total number of minds in the universe is one. I like this thing, the consciousness is a singularity phasing within all beings. That sounds like something from Star Trek, you know. I don't really know what a singularity is. I kind of get what phasing is, but I like the way that whole sentence goes together. A singularity phasing within all beings. And I think that's true. And, you know, when people talk about the connection, you know, that we're all connected, and I never really got that. I never really had that feeling, because I only ever look out of these eyes, this body. Similarly to you, I imagine. But I've only ever got my experience. So this sense of connection that people talk, usually after they've had some sort of psychedelic experience, I don't doubt them, but I just don't have that experience. It doesn't resonate with me, just similar to what I was saying before. But this idea of that consciousness and what happens in the mystery, and the mystery is where we all come from. I get that for sure. And I think this is what he's talking about in this. I didn't write this one, but it's great. It says, you can't change the people around you, but you can change the people around you. Which initially when I read it, I was like, what? But then, of course, you go, okay, you can't change the people around you, meaning you can't change people. But you can change the people who are around you, meaning you can gravitate to different people, or you can let different people gravitate to you. It's kind of sad, but true. Meaning, if you think you can change people, that's a recipe for heartbreak as far as I can see. And it's also not very trusting of life and the mystery and the way things work. Meaning that everybody's becoming more conscious. You know, they may not be going at the speed you would like, but you don't know what they're trying to figure out in their lives. You don't know what the agenda is. So if you try and change people, it's going to be very heartbreaking for you, because it won't work. And then also, if you find that the fact that they're not changing is too disturbing for you, then you may find that life replaces them, or that you have to replace them, or you have to move away from them. And no one likes to think of that. I don't anyway. but it happens. And whether I do it consciously or whether life organizes it, it happens. The people are changed. And again, it's a matter of facing that and kind of being okay with it. Because generally the people that are replaced by them are more in line with you, or there's more harmony with them. Not always, depends on what you're working at in your life, but generally, if you're very involved in your life and your consciousness, the people that they change to will be more harmonious for you. And then the last one I put up last night because it was the full moon. I like putting this one up when there's a full moon. It says, when the moon is full, howl on. I can't remember if I wrote this or not. I think I might have, but I'm not sure. But either way, I think it's great. The idea of howling at the moon. Not that I do it, but I do it inwardly or something, you know. I heard somebody describing the way the moon works on the earth and how the moon affects the tides. And it stayed with me. I think it was that Neil deGrasse, I can't remember his full name, you know, that guy, the science guy. And because I've often wondered, how does the moon make the tides go back and forth? I've kind of, you know, because the moon, like I work with lots of people in the one-to-one work, and I work with a lot of women, and often their menstrual cycle is so linked to the moon. They feel it very keenly. And like say in my one-to-one work, I often use that analogy of like the moon doesn't touch the ocean, but yet the tide comes in and out. And in the same way, I don't touch the people I work with physically, and yet our work together produces great results. Anyway, Neil said, you know, he said the moon doesn't pull the tides back and forth. He said what actually happens is that there's a gravitational field. I'm sure he didn't use those words, but there's a field that's set up, a magnetic field between the earth and the sun. And it creates a bulge in the oceans around this magnetic field. So it's like the oceans are pulled out, bulging a little bit, caught in this magnetism between the earth and the sun. And what happens is the earth rotates, and as it rotates, and it's almost like it rotates under the bubble. So the bubble kind of stays static, held in place between the earth and the sun. And then the earth rotates, and it's the rotation of the earth. It rotates into the tide, which blew my mind a bit, because I was kind of thinking that the moon pulled the ocean one way and then it pulled it back the other way. And it's like, no, it's actually the earth is rotating under the ocean, and that the ocean is being held in suspension by these two by this kind of dynamic field between these two planets. Pretty wild. So yeah, I could have that completely wrong, but I think that is the way he explained it. And it's pretty amazing. Okay, that's all I have for you this time. I trust you're well. I trust you're of good cheer. And I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.